Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. We are very pleased today to receive one of the major figures of contemporary science fiction in America, writer, journalist, and translator Sue Burke. As a writer, she has published novels, short stories, poems, and articles in a variety of magazines and anthologies. Her novels, Semiosis, Immunity Index, and Interference have received a wide acclaim both in and outside the USA. And that's why we are talking about her here in Morocco today. As a translator, and in 2017, Burke received the Alicia Golden Award for Word Artistry in Translation from the American Translator Association for her English translation of an excerpt from Joseph de la Vega, Confusión de Confusiones, written in Spanish in 1688. Her translations from Spanish to English include Amadis of Gaul, Book 1, Book 2, Book 3, and Book 4. She also translated the Canción Antigua, an old song anthology of poems. Indeed, it is through her translation that I myself was transported into the imaginary world of Amadis, explored, commented, and satirized by Cervantes in his work Don Quixote. So in her article, Writing Non-Human Points of View, she noted that, and I cite, "Not every mind is human, which is a challenge for authors. It's hard enough to write from a different human point of view. Yet if we are going to write speculative fiction, we can't let that stop us." So certainly her own fiction challenges the humanist tradition that makes of man the measure of everything. She rather espouses a post-human outlook where non-human points of views are highlighted via themes and narrative structure. Really, it is a pleasure and an honor to receive such a prolific and erudite author as Sue Burke, and on behalf of my university, the students, and all the participants, I thank you for accepting to share your work and point of view with us. Before I pass the floor to our guest, let me first thank the President of the University, Sidi Mohamed Ben Abdellah, the Dean of the Faculty of Letters and the Human Sciences for Sais. I also want to thank Professor Abdelmoum El-Azzouzi, the head of the Laboratory Language, Imaginaire, and Aesthetics, for his efforts and encouragement. I similarly want to thank the Dean of the Faculty Polydisciplinaire of Ouarzazate and Professor Rabi El-Jouhari for allowing the students in Ouarzazate to participate in this event. By the way, I will send you as a message in the discussion the link for the second part, because the Zoom allows only 40 minutes for each session. So we'll divide this meeting into two sessions, 40 minutes and 40 minutes. So while during the discussion, I will send you the message. When this first one is over, you can click on the second one and we can go on with the discussion again. So this, Sue Burke, I pass the floor to you to further share with us the way the non-human point of view and science have affected your writing, and maybe to read us a passage from one of your works. After, we will open the floor for questions, especially from students. And thank you so much again. The floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I had the pleasure of visiting Morocco a few years back with my husband, and we got to Fez, and we enjoyed the beauty, but most of all, I came away impressed by the warmth and generosity of the people of Morocco. Everywhere I turned, there were always people willing to help and willing to share information and genuine kindness. It was truly a pleasure to visit. As I said, I write science fiction. I've also been a journalist. I write poetry. I do translations. I have also taught English as a second language. If it's words, it's something that I enjoy. So why do I write science fiction? There's a lot of belief that science fiction is about the future, and it is often set in the future. But in the end, I think science fiction is always about the present. In my book, Semiosis, this is actually a plant. This is a tentacle of a carnivorous plant, because in this book, plants do eat animals. Right now, we're concerned about our environment and our ecology, as we should be, because we're facing enormous planet problems. Semiosis has the idea of what if plants could think and they could plan ahead the way that human beings do. And then we have a lot of plants also in our own world have a lot of ways to deal with the environment. They are not passive, they are active. They try to control things. They try to control animals, and they do. For example, plants need us, animals, to disperse their seeds. And they do this in a lot of ways. With humans, if you plant a tomato and it grows little tomato plants and then the tomato fruit, at one point the tomato will turn red. Why does it do that? To show you that you should eat the tomato because it's ready for you now. Tomato seeds can pass through us if we don't cook them, and then they come out at the other end and possibly in a good place to grow. So the tomato is telling us that we should eat their fruit, because tomatoes are fruit technically, because they want us to do something for them. And we've worked out an arrangement. So plants do communicate with us in that way and in many, many other ways. We know that flowers attract bees for other sorts of fruit. Wheat grows so many seeds at once, we can't eat them all. But they have convinced us that we should grow wheat, so that wheat now covers vast spaces on the planet, because wheat has convinced us, has domesticated us to take care of wheat. Apple trees, the same way. So plants communicate with us. They have a lot of interactions with us. And that's just one of the things that they can do. Another way is that if a plant is attacked by, say, caterpillars that are going to eat it, the plant can give off a chemical, a scent that will tell other plants are in the area, this kind of caterpillar is here. Plants can make a chemical that will make their leaves taste bad, or in fact, even kill the caterpillar. And that's how they can fight back against caterpillars and other sorts of pests that they encounter. Trees, as we have learned, actually communicate with each other through their roots and through the soil, and know a lot about what's going on, and they can help each other. If they get sick, they can share chemicals that might help them fight off the disease. They can give them food to keep them alive until they get well. So there's a whole lot going on. I could go on for hours about everything that plants do, but they don't seem to think ahead very far. They can't. Some trees do seem to remember what the weather was like last year, so they can plan ahead for the weather this year. But beyond that, they don't seem to do a lot. But what if they could think like human beings? Well, that means we would have to treat them as equals, because they have the power to control us. If they could really think about what they're doing and they could communicate with us, they could tell us what to do. So this is a way to explore our environment, because right now we think we're in charge. I'm not sure we are actually, but we think we are. What if they could meet us as equals and tell us what we have to do? A tree could tell us, no, 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 you can't chop me down, or you will pay a price. And that's essentially what I explore in here. I use science fiction to say, what if we had an ecology that was equal with us? And then I had a lot of fun with that. Another book, right now we're still working through a pandemic. I started this book, I should tell you, this is called Immunity Index. And so as you can see, there's actually a coronavirus in here. I started this book in 2018. 2018 was the 100-year anniversary of the Spanish flu. And so there was a lot of information about the Spanish flu, a lot of history. Public health officials around the world were looking at what happened, what we could learn from that. One of the things that they said was that the flu was politicized back 100 years ago, and we are not prepared for any other sort of pandemic that might happen now. And this was 1918. So I started writing a book about that. And what if there was a very, very politicized epidemic Well, what happened was not quite as bad as in this book. And this book has a happy ending. I want to say that. But it was a way to use science fiction to explore what if a disease came and we treated it in a way totally politicized and used it as a way to fight our enemies and to help ourselves. So that's in that book. Another thing that's in that book, there's a woolly mammoth. Woolly mammoths were big things like elephants, but very, very furry. They used to live where I live now. I'm in Illinois, in North America. They were also in Asia. They went extinct about the time that the glaciers ended. One of the reasons was probably because human beings hunted them because they were really tasty and easy to kill because we had spears and could hunt in packs. So they're extinct now, but could we bring them back? There are people actually looking into how we could do that. What if we did? So in this book, there is a de-extincted woolly mammoth, and it looks at the ethics of that, because woolly mammoths were very much like elephants. What we know about elephants is that they are social beings. They live in big groups, even males who seem to be running off on their own. They're also very socially connected with a whole lot of other males and with some of the other packs. These are very, very social animals. If we brought them back, can we bring back 100 at a time? No. If we bring that 1 or 2 or 3, is that enough? No, it's not. 1 or 2 or 3 elephants all alone, they don't do well. Social beings, when they are isolated, have real troubles with mental health. So we have this elephant or woolly mammoth, and he's all alone. And what are the ethical questions of that? So that's in there. One of the questions that we're asking ourselves now. We can do a lot with genetics. We're going to be able to do more. At one point, do we have to think, if we can do that, should we do that? So science fiction is a commentary often on the present, but Ray Bradbury says he does not write to predict the future. He didn't. He wrote to prevent the future. And again, he was looking at questions, if we went to Mars, what would happen if there were already Martians there? What would become of them? Other questions, if we could totally mechanize a house, what happens if something goes wrong? He wrote a little story about that. And there's a toaster and it doesn't work right, but its job is to just keep making toast. And pretty soon it burns down the house. So if we have a totally mechanized house, we're going to need some ways to protect it from doing what it wants to do. But not all science fiction is sad. There's something came out of Brazil. It's called solar punk. And what it's trying to do is look at, so we're probably going to have a bad ecological time in the near future. What happens after that? Is that there a way we can get a good future out of some difficulties that are probably going to happen too? That's why it's called solar punk, because probably solar energy, certainly something very bright. And so it looks at stories set after that. And they can still be very exciting. I read one solar punk story. It was a murder mystery, but the solution from the mystery came from biofuel. No spoilers, but so they're living in a future, everything is good, but they're still murders, but they can use their technology in the future to solve a murder mystery. So it's a way to explore the future, all sorts of other things. And they can be very happy stories. They can be scary stories, but they're stories set after something that happens. Another way to look at science fiction is it is a fiction about change, particularly about technical change, technological change, social change, and what happens after that. The thing with external change is that we can't control it. A lot of literary fiction believes that if you understand what's going on around you and you can make decisions about that, you can take control of your life, and that will fulfill you. And that's true, but science fiction says it is also true that if the Martians attack tomorrow, no matter how well you understand yourself, no matter how much self-control you have, you're in trouble. And the only way to solve that is doing things external to your life. In our own lives, for example, social media has made enormous changes. Can anything I do have any control over Facebook? No, Facebook's going to do what it wants, maybe good, maybe bad. I just have to deal with it. So that all of the different technologies that we have are basically too big for one person to control. And then we have to deal with that by dealing with their external lives. We may not need to change, but we have to change what's around us in order to solve those problems. So that's very different from literary fiction, which tends to focus on internal change of the characters. Science fiction can focus on the external change that the characters have to do, but they can do it in some interesting ways. There's a television show that came out just now. It's called Severance, and it's what if your work life, what you do at work, you could totally forget about, and your social life, what you do after work, could be totally unconnected, except of course that you get a paycheck and then you can spend that money. And then what happens? Well, nothing very good, because it is a dehumanizing way. Only half of you is here, only half of you is there, you're only half a person. So that's a way to look at our present, though, because work can be pretty dehumanizing, some of the jobs that we do. What effect does that have on us? Star Trek is very famous because especially the original Star Treks looked at a very bright future. We're going to explore the universe. There'll be problems, obviously, but we have the skills, we have the abilities to make a good future for ourselves. Star Trek is totally an adventure story. There's a world out there, there's villains and heroes and technologies and this and that, and we just have to deal with that. But that's a kind of science fiction, as I say, dealing with the external life, dealing with things we can't change, but that are going to change us. Those are some of the ways you can use science fiction. I want to mention one more thing. I just finished reading a book by a Russian writers, Arkady and Boris Strugatsky, and it's called Hard to be a God. They're pretty famous for being some of Russia's very best science fiction writers. Russia has a lot of them. They wrote in 1963, and the book is about some people on another planet. The planet is having a convulsive political situation. And the visitors who are from Earth, from a future Earth that is a wonderful Earth, a Goodyear Earth, and they're trying to think, what can we do to help these people get through? There's a repressive government, they're arresting all of the intelligentsia, even poets. The point is, though, this book is talking about the Soviet Union in 1963 and how is their government, because they had a crackdown at the time. How can you look at that? But they could sneak it past the censors, because the Soviet censors were pretty severe at the time, and talk about their own present by using science fiction as a metaphor. Another planet, it's far away, there's a lot of adventure, you don't need to worry about it, it's not about Russia, but it's about Russia. And what they could do with that, and the way that they examine their own present, is deeply, deeply moving. And so this book has remained a classic. So those are some of the things that you can do with science fiction. Is there more that I can say? I didn't plan a long lecture.
Thank you so much, Sue Burke, for these insightful thoughts. I have one question before opening the floor to students and other attendees to ask their own questions. Can we say that is science fiction still science fiction? Now we distinguish between different genres like realism, science fiction, and I always ask myself this question, especially when I read science fiction or watch movies. Sometimes I find myself watching something I'm familiar with, something that is everywhere. We are all surrounded by technology, by many of the changes. So that's why I always ask myself this question: is science fiction? Shall we call it science fiction like in few years or something else?
Yeah, well, so I wrote a book about a coronavirus outbreak, and then there was a coronavirus outbreak. Was that science fiction when I wrote it? Yes, but as I say, science fiction is often about the present, so that it's not always easy to tell. Another thing that is happening, though, is I mentioned that there's literary fiction and then there's genre fiction. One of the wonderful things about the time that we're living now is that the borders are breaking down. So often in science fiction, the importance of character that is in literary fiction is starting to become, well, it is very much important now in some science fiction works. So looking at not just external change, but internal change, what happens to the people as they go through the novel. So that's one of the borders it's breaking down. Another is that our science is moving very, very fast. So something I write about, or even was written about very early in science fiction in the 1940s and 1950s, some of the people writing it, because they were in fact scientists or knew about science, were writing about satellites, about space exploration, about communication. What if there was a worldwide way of communication that we could talk to anyone, anywhere in the world, anytime we wanted? Science fiction. 50 years ago, right now, I can talk to anyone, anywhere in the world, anytime I want, and it's not science fiction. The point is, though, or the difference is that to try to look not just at what we can do because of that, but what changes because of that. What effect does that have on us? And that's where science fiction gets a little different, because it tries to look at what is the next step. So now we can call up anyone and talk to anyone at any time. What does that mean? To use an example, there's a war going on right now in Ukraine, and we can talk to people in Ukraine. We can get information about what's going on in Ukraine. There's a whole lot of spy satellites that are looking at things. We know that the United States government is doing this and is giving this information to Ukraine. So the entire way that they fight the war is different. We can watch battles in real time. We could not do this 50 years ago. What does that mean for the war? How do we understand war now? There's actually a guy I know in Ukraine, and I'm following him on Facebook, and what's happening to him and his family in Kyiv. So that this war is different. What will the next war be like? Because we're all connected. That's a hard question, and that's the fun question when you're a writer, is that you can think about these things. You can come up with one answer. There's 20 answers to that question. What happens if a war happens in real time and everyone can watch everything that's going on? And that's, right. Yes. As I want to say, that's not quite science fiction now, but what if we could just make it a little bit more, because it probably will be.
Yes, you are right. I still remember the word robot itself is taken from a play, and now it's a reality, like William Gibson, like Cyberspace. It was the title of a novel. We are Brave New World. Like no one would even think about cloning, but now it's reality. So many of the things that we used to read in science fiction, now when I read the novels, when I teach them personally, I don't see the science fiction in it, but I teach it as part of the contemporary reality. So now we will give the floor to students to ask questions. So just to be fair, we'll go between Fes and Ouarzazate. Because Ouarzazate is our guest, we will start with students from the University Faculty Polydisciplinaire in Ouarzazate. So anyone in Ouarzazate who has like a question? Yes, students from Ouarzazate? Can you activate your mic, Rabia? Can you activate it? And by the way, in 8 minutes exactly, this session will be over. So please check in the messages, the new link for the second part of it. So we have a lady from Ouarzazate. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You have mentioned that science fiction predicts the future and also helps societies to make good future. Is it the same situation for such societies that are still suffer from poverty?
That is a very good question. It's not always addressed in science fiction as well as I think that it should be. I tried to do that a little bit in my latest book. One of the persons in there just does not have very much money, and she has to deal with the situation with from someone who doesn't have a lot of resources. But other books have tried to deal with the question of poverty, of that the world is not divided up equally. What is the saying about Brazil? It is the country of the future, and it always will be, that it is never going to quite get there. Sometimes I think that literary fiction does a better job of this than science fiction does. It is, though, a good question. You will see it's sometimes addressed, not always enough. Perhaps because it's just a very hard question to answer.
Thank you so much. Do we have other questions from Ouarzazate before we leave to Fez? Other questions from Ouarzazate?
Yes, Mourad, there is another sentence.
Okay. And thank you, Professor Labia Jouhadi, for collaborating in this and for helping the student. Thank you so much.
Our students are very enthusiastic to listen to you, Dr. Mourad and Dr. Brooke. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hi, first of all, it's a big honor for us to meeting you. And my question is, what is the hardest part of being a writer, especially in science fiction?
The hardest part is inventing a good story, I think. Some people think ideas are difficult, but mostly it's not. I can get 3 ideas before breakfast. Turning an idea into a story is hard because it has to be interesting. It has to make sense. Yeah, and you need characters, you need a setting. There's a lot of words. And you don't write, well, you write, okay, so you write a rough draft. Then you write another draft. Then you write another draft. Right now, the book I'm writing, I am on the 4th draft. I know there will be at least another one. So I'm writing the book, then I'm rewriting the book, and I'm rewriting the book to move in the first place, to discover what exactly is the story, then make sure all of the characters make sense. There are all of the scenes that are there need to be there. Do I need everything? So the hard part is just actual craft. But I also think that that's where the magic comes, because writing is an art. But as a musician once said, if you pay attention to the craft, how do you use your instrument? What can you do with it in writing? How do you use the words? What are the best words? How do you organize a story? That's when the art comes out through that, when you have mastered the art of the actual writing. And that is the difficult part. That's why I like translating, is because someone else did all the hard work and now I just have to change it into another language. That's difficult, but I don't think it's as difficult as writing the thing in the first place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sue, and even for the students for the wonderful questions. So because it will be over now, we will close this one and I will open the new session. So you all have your link, the access to the link I sent. So you just click on the second link and we have a new session to go on with the questions.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everyone.